uh, I got my experience, undergrad in biology, master's degree in social science, and how people learn and how communities are formed. And it's weird how that has turned into something that I use all the time. So
Wait. You got a college education you're actually using?
believe it, yeah, but not as anybody intended. I mean, I've been I had for a time, like I said, I have an undergrad in biology, and for a while I was a cross between Jacques Cousteau and Mr. Fun on a boat that did camps in marine science research.
Oh, where
So
where was that? What city?
Southern California.
Okay.
Well, Southern California, we spent the summers out around Catalina, and then in the winters we opened up Hawaii, so we would work with schools out off. I spent a lot of time about 50 yards off the coast of Hawaii. Uh, I got, it's really hard, but I accomplished getting hypothermic in Hawaiian waters because I spent so much time diving there.
That's diving. Well, impressive. I'm a PADI diver, and we got to give a shout out to our good friend Jen Poyer, who's a meeting planner for Catalina Island.
Okay. Yeah, I spent a lot of time out there. I actually worked at a camp there for a little bit, Catalina Island Marine Institute, and then again in the boat off there, and spent some time doing all kinds of different camping type stuff out there. So, and I've my background there is I got certified in PADI, I got open water in NAUI, and then I got all my dive leadership stuff up to instructor and specialties instructors, all that kind of stuff through SSI. So I've dealt with all the different organizations. Actually, that really scuba diving really impacted how I design learning. The concept of mastery in diving is that you can't just course and get all that. You have to have courses, you have to have experience, and you have to demonstrate skills. And so when I put together a coaching certification program for enterprise-wide coaching solutions, and we didn't do like high stakes testing, you basically had to demonstrate skill, show experience, and go through the courses, and then get two existing master coaches to sign off on your skills. By signing off, they would say, I stake my reputation on your skills.
Wow. Yeah. I'm an advanced diver. So like cool things that we did was search and rescue, like where you start at a point and then swim spirals out. Mm-hmm. And we also did night diving. We did a little bit of search and rescue. So, I really believe that too. So, John, why don't we go ahead and we'll dive into learning. I love that you take the metaphor. My metaphor too, John, came from skateboarding. I was a sponsored amateur skateboarder. If you ever saw Dogtown and Z-Boys, I was 2 teams after that team.
Okay.
And skateboarding has the same thing, which is like you have to learn how to perform, and you don't learn like in a contest. It's none of those things. It's can you do this trick, in front of people, or more importantly, can you do it for yourself? And so I've always thought about those 3 stages of learning. One is somebody told you about it. Right. Number 2 is that you try and actually do it. Right. And the third one is you teach somebody else. When you teach somebody else, I think that's when you really learn something. Because when I know that I've done it, I thought I knew something, and then I try and teach them. I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah. And then every time you teach it, you learn something new.
Right.
I would gauge if somebody is ready to become a master coach, it's when they figured out how little they knew about coaching. There's the old saying that when the student is ready, the master will appear.
Yeah.
And the job of the master is knowing when to appear with what. You don't have to give them everything. You just have to give them what's next.
Yeah. Context, right? Like I love context, which is you have all these tools as a coach, right? Questions or whatever it is like that. But can you get the right tool, right, for the right person in the right moment? That's really where the skill is to me. Right? It's not that you know enough, but that you actually brought the right thing at the right time. Right?
Yeah, coaching isn't about now. Mentoring and consulting is about knowing stuff. Coaching is about bringing clarity, and it's not. There's a great with my mentor Fred Harburg on coaching. He always says when we're doing introductory coaching classes, is a great line from The Incredibles when the Elastic Woman says to Mr. Incredible, "It's not about you." And that's the truth about coaching is, can you set your own agenda and goals aside for the person who you're trying to, whether it's about performance coaching or it's about executive coaching, which executive isn't a position, it's a part of your brain, your executive function. And the difference is one is about increasing capacity and skill building. The other is about developing judgment. And it's not about you. All those things, you need to set aside what you think they need, because what you're doing is you're solving your problem that you had when you were in their situation. You're not even working with them. So
John, bring us up to date then. Tell us a little bit more now. Like, what are you doing today, or what are you doing now for the world?
Well, that's I'm trying to, continue to impact the world by just being a guide and being what I call an organizational ecologist. And those two work really well together, because I've never been in a situation where it was purely about coaching or guiding, or it was purely about organizational development. It's always a mix of those things. The pandemic brought me back into doing a lot of virtual stuff. Before 2020, I was really focused on specifically working with organizations and then going in and helping them both identify what coaching opportunities there are, but also how we could create the culture that they wanted. Now, my intentionally provocative statement is you can't change culture. You can only change the systems that produce the behaviors that reveal that culture. Culture is just a reflection of your systems. So I would go in and work with the systems, and I'd go in and work with the individuals, and then we would get a healthier workplace, and we would help them also overcome. I work mostly with organizations and people in transition. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to be a going concern, you want to move from that entrepreneurial state, I can help you as an organization and an individual get there. So that's what I was doing in 2020. And then, like, my whole world got wiped out, like many other people's. In March, it blew up. And I realized that I'd been in the virtual space since 2027. About 2007 is when I went and worked in a large corporate university. And because it was national and international, we had to have virtual meetings. First, it was just phone conferences. And then we started using WebEx as a virtual meeting platform. And we really, like, in 2009, they decided that we had to go into webinars. The bean counters all thought, hey, we're going to save a lot of money, a lot of resistance from the field. And so we got our best instructional designers, our best facilitators, and we put together, we changed a bunch of our training into webinar format, and it was horrible. It was terrible because all this skill we misapplied in a new context. Now, we later found out how to move. The skill sets were totally transferable, but we were just treating it exactly the same. So through extreme sucking, we started to put together some really, really good virtual experience, blended and cohorts, and trying to get the right modality for the right content. And I had that experience. So when COVID hit, I just started doing free workshops for people which were as simple as, let's open up Zoom and play. Let's see if we can break it. And that was 2000. I think it was in 2009. I went to, used to be a little pamphlet out called the Webinar Manifesto. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No, Webinar Manifesto?
The Webinar Manifesto, and it was put out in I think 2007, something like that. So early on. And I went to a workshop that the authors put on. The one thing I walk away from that is their recommendation is, whatever platform you're going to use, read the user guide and then toss it out and try and break the platform. Because they write the user guide to use it the way that they vision it. And the thing is, we as producer and designers, we need to start with the outcomes and then figure out the way to make it work. So I started doing that with, we sat down in Zoom, and I'd been in Zoom for a couple of years because I tried Google Meets and I tried GoToMeeting. I never liked the way they'd handled video. And same with WebEx. They were built on the same platform. But we just started playing and trying to break Zoom and found out what worked and what didn't. Did the same thing with Microsoft Team and Google Meets. And I actually had a chance to help produce meetings for both divisions of Microsoft and divisions of Google. And we were teaching them how to use their product because they hadn't totally played with it. They were just doing what they were told.
That's right.
And they're going, wait, what? How did you do that? Wait, come back. One of my most satisfying moments was, I think it was one of those companies, I won't call anybody out, but their event planner was like, well, why are we doing this? Because we already know how to use our tool. Why do you have to be the one producing? Why do you have to do this? And afterwards, she sent me an email that was saying, oh my gosh, I never dreamed you could do so much with these tools. And a lot of it just came from trying to, and I say break the platform. It's really break the platform to your will.
Yeah.
And figure out what you start with what you want to accomplish. And then you move towards, all right, the platform can get me that far. And then I can start to, as soon as I started, hey, people, you can combine your platform with another resource, and it blew their minds. These experiential facilitators who thought COVID was going to end their industry, they all of a sudden would come away from one of these playgrounds with hope. Man, I can do this stuff now. I just got to figure it out.
Well, and not only can you do that, but it's necessary because there's so much bad video virtual meetings, right, going on that a facilitator is the next thing that you really need to improve a meeting. Last night I was producing on WebEx, and it has this really unique feature of a stage, which is I thought it was bad, right? Which is you have to update. You have to click a button, like if I change scenes here. Hold on, I'm going to change scenes to you. Watch, right? On the live stream is now that you're on here, right? And now if I click this button, both of us are on. In WebEx, you can actually set this up. So you can actually move a bunch of people on and off screen, but nobody else sees it until you click an update button. And while that might be a clunky feature, that's actually really useful because now I can make multi-person moves, right? I can take you off, I can put 3 other people for a panel on, and then I just sit here waiting on the update button, and as soon as the MC asks for the panel, bam, everybody changes. And so, every platform has an advantage, and even if it looks clunky in the beginning, its application can be better. John, my number one question for this interview series is this, which is, for you personally, what has to happen for a virtual meeting to be engaging?
I think the very first thing that needs to happen is having expectations aligned. If I'm there, because there's different reasons why you would have a meeting. And when you say meeting, it brings up different things for different people. For some people, a meeting is 4 or 5 people in a room doing something with outcomes expected. For other people, a meeting equals a conference. And I think I spoke at an HR conference just 2 months ago, and it was hybrid. And we didn't line expectations up of what hybrid meant. Ooh. And so I walked in there with my expectation. I was rushing from, I just did the same topic at a different all-in-person conference, no hybrid. They gave me 3 hours to do the same topic. This HR conference gave me 45 minutes. And so I had to do my editing, and I took a whole different approach of what you could accomplish, and whereas the other one, I didn't rely on the PowerPoint or the visuals much at all. This one, I was relying more on the visuals. And when I walked in, and this was at a major convention center using the, best AV tech and all that kind of stuff. But there was a couple of things. There was no expectations for the AV people. It was like, we've got 100 people online waiting to get going here. And the live conference was running 15 minutes late. So I'm standing in this room, and all the AV people going, okay, go, you're on, go. And there's nobody in the room. And they also didn't tell me that how they were going to do the projection is they weren't going to mix like the visuals. I thought I was just going to have PowerPoint up on the screen and they would work with it. Well, they're projecting what was going out on Zoom. So
just like you and the screen that was projected, not taking the screen directly into virtual.
Well, exactly. They were doing, basically they were projecting the Zoom meeting. And what they did is share the screen, which had my picture in picture, which was obscuring some of my slides. Yeah, because I hadn't designed the slides with that in mind. So that wasn't aligned at all. And I think a big piece is like, if you're doing, there's a bunch of reasons to have a meeting. Part of every meeting, I think, but you can have just solely this is team building and collaboration. That's can be part of everyone to do that team bonding, team building, all that kind of stuff, just because you're interacting. But another reason to have a meeting is information transfer. And information transfer, if that's what is expected, then it's really up to the presenter to create that engagement. And one of the things we learned when we were sucking at webinars is that when you present in person, you at least every 15 minutes, you want to create an opportunity, either change the scene or change the action and
Yep.
engage the audience.
Yep.
When you're doing a webinar, and I'll talk about webinars in just a minute, but when you're doing a webinar, information transfer, that moves to every 3 to 5 minutes. You've got to ask people to click, to talk, to do something every 3 to 5 minutes, because there's so many options of what's out there. And that, if you know that it's going to be information transfer, and whether it's a conference of 10,000 or a meeting of 5, you've got to ask for that engagement. You've got to that's where it's really up on the presenter to bring the engagement. And I know you've seen presenters who can just sit there with a microphone and a camera and be mesmerizing. And these are the ones that don't necessarily need the audience feedback to know whether they're hitting or not. So another reason to have a meeting might be to find agreement. And it's all a matter of know your purpose, and then design your meeting based on that purpose, whether it's information transfer, finding agreement, making a decision, troubleshooting, or innovation and creativity.
Side note, do you know about Lucid meetings?
Tell me about Lucid meetings. I've heard the term, but I don't know much about it.
Well, Lucid Meetings is a company, I think, in Oregon, and my friend who's the chief of staff, Tyler Paris, refers to it all the time. And basically, online for free, they have 16 meeting types, and then they give you templates of like how to prepare for it. So again, if you are the first time organizing a particular type of meeting, brainstorming or board meeting or whatever, they have defined these like 16 most common type of meetings like that, and then give you a structure for it so that you can, create an agenda that is recommended for it, so you're likely to get the results. Also, for what you to think about, because the key, I think, John, is what you said, is most great virtual meetings start before the meeting starts, which is that planning, that alignment, even that goal, right? What do you want? Sounds simple, but I've got a lot of clients, if you ask them going, we want a virtual meeting, and I'm like, no, that's not what you want. Right?
Yeah. And then, I had that all the time in the corporate world when I was designing training and interactions and all that kind of stuff. They would say, we want videos. I said, why? What do you want to accomplish? And that's everything starts. And this is, I think, it's not just in virtual, it's not just in meetings, but you always start with your outcomes. Whether you're talking, that's about how you provide growth, and what we call the transformation model, which is not just about individuals or groups or learning. It's like, you need to start. Most people start with, all right, let's do this. And here's the solution. And other people will think, you know what, we're going to do some assessments first to figure out where we're at, and then we'll do this.
Sure.
But the best way to do it and get what you need, you start with what you want to accomplish. You start with the definition of success, because then you're not limiting your options to what you already have or what you already know. You're setting out a vision or a goal. Brain science means that once you know what you want, and then you take a look at what you have, your brain will want to close that gap automatically.
Speaking of success, I would love to hear, maybe give me an example of a meeting where all the attendees are aligned and something cool or magical or valuable happened. I'd love to hear an example of that on virtual.
Well, I think, let me see. I've got two that I can pull from. Sure. One is probably the most annoying and boring meeting, whether live or in person, that you can imagine, which is Robert's Rules of Order. Or we can go towards a program that I do and that I've done in a couple of different contexts that's all about what I call practical creativity. And so
I want to hear that.
The practical creativity. All right. So practical creativity is, I had the great opportunity to do a lot of work with a former Imagineer for Disney named Craig McNair Wilson, who put together, in the late 70s, he put together the curriculum for Imagineering, so they had a common language about creativity. And so I take his stuff, I invited him into the corporate world, and together we kind of designed a enterprise-wide facilitating creativity program. And then I took some of that, and I took some of the habits around practicality or implementation, and that's where practical creativity comes from. And so it was just I started doing these. I created a template. I use Mural, or you can Miro, and it's about the same thing. So when you're doing, and when you want to have some of the decision making or practicality, that's where I add Mural to Zoom or to another platform, and all of a sudden we're all in the same space, able to work and still be able to communicate and see each other. And so when you do a little bit of warm up, and then all of a sudden you start to just say, all right, here's the setup. This is what we're working on. And I think we were working on, let me see if I've got this up. And
you can share.
Yeah. So we're talking about blended programs, and that's my terminology.
Yes.
About, because hybrid is, you get in trouble when you start talking hybrid. And because people have different expectations. So this one, I can't remember. This was just one of the things. I can't remember what the group was, but I start off, and I'm changing the way I do this. But as pre-meeting, we talk about Mural playgrounds and just let people come in and play with everything. So they play with all the functions, and you come in here.
Yeah, I agree with you. Train them, but make it fun and make it what do we call it? Safe. You know, you can make a mistake while you're doing this training. There's like no mistakes, right?
Right. And this is where, and this is kind of, so back to backstory on this. One of the things I learned is Michelle Cummins.
Oh yeah. Of course.
When all this hit, she called me a couple of times and said, help me figure this out. So we talked and we figured out some stuff. And then when I was with her in her audience, when she went on for the very first time, which, by the way, probably she is so good at changing and adapting because she's so brave.
Yeah.
And she went on like, let's do this. And all of a sudden she was expecting maybe 100 people, and she had to upgrade her Zoom account to get 500 people in there.
Yeah.
And it was funny because she had not thought through a lot of things, totally, like not knowing how to turn off annotation.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, with all that many people, and especially with knuckleheads like myself who are in our industry, they just kept on annotating once they learned how. And so I got in a side conversation during it and said, okay, go here, here. And so what I wanted to do is make sure that people both knew the tools and they could ruin that. I don't care. But then they felt more comfortable when we got down to, because this is a highly interactive program.
Yeah.
And so you come down here, and this was the topic that we're working on: blended programs and the process. And I have the process guidelines, so here's creative process. And then here's the practical creativity sequence, all that kind of stuff. And you can see they went a little off the reservation with their notes, which is totally cool.
Yeah.
But you do all these, now I can go through my whole process. And when I was doing this in person, actually, anytime, I'm more of a facilitator than a presenter. I can do the stage. I prefer interaction. So even when I'm keynoting, if I speak more than 30 or 40% of the time, I feel like I've failed. So most of the time I'm interacting, I'm having them do discussions, I'm having them do activities, and Mural and Mentimeter, and now there's other platforms that I use too, really allow for that. So that's the fun, like aha or wonderful moment. But let me tell you about Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, I'm ready. Go.
Okay, I hate that, but there are some
organizations. Wait, John. I second that. Continue.
Yes. All right. Discussion. Okay. So when the COVID hit, I actually our church was told that we couldn't meet in person, and I actually had a bunch of stuff in my garage. So Thursday we said we couldn't meet in person, and by Sunday I had like a total jury rigged to be able to live stream for the church. Well, I got the reputation in that community of being able to do virtual stuff. So they asked me to start to produce their that's called the Presbytery. It's the area meeting, larger meeting type stuff. And so I started producing their virtual meetings, which were Robert Rules of Order. And so I had to be very clear and did a lot of teaching up front about how to use all this kind of stuff. There are many people who are part of that leadership who are not virtual natives, shall we say.
That's right.
And so a lot of teaching there, help them feel comfortable. Then this was the really interesting thing, is when we went hybrid. And hybrid, the hybrid part of it was really the challenge, because they had actually, they had doubled their attendance to these meetings because they were virtual. And now there are people who are insisting that they go live, and there are others who weren't comfortable in person. So we set up Robert's Rules of Order in for this group that had, I think 40 people were in person, and maybe 50 people were online. That might be a little bit big, but and so what we did is so crucial when you do hybrid, and this is the challenge of hybrid. It's what I call, when you set up what I call like KA hybrid room, which is a kick-ass hybrid room.
KAH.
Yeah. And the idea is that you want to level the playing field between the people in the room and the people online.
That's right.
Now, previously, people in the room had the advantage because people hadn't thought through how to get people online. Now, everybody online has their own microphone and their own camera. So they have more of a stage than the people in the room. So we had to figure out how to create that stage for people in the room. And we did it without fancy mixers or anything. We actually just produced on Zoom. And I had, now here's some secrets about affordability so I have my really nice, actually the church itself had a couple of really nice pan tilt Zoom cameras.
Good.
That we used as the main cameras. But then I set up iPad or iPod Touch. Okay. Basically iPhones without the phone.
With a camera.
Right. And a good camera.
Yeah.
And so we set up a couple of those touches around the room and logged them into Zoom separately.
Yep.
So we are using Zoom as the video switcher.
That's right.
All the microphones, all the audio came from a single place. We didn't even hook up the audio for those.
That's right.
So we were able to create a level playing field. So everybody that was speaking on emotion or making emotion, and it just so happened that this particular session went deep into Robert's Rules. And so they had people coming up and like the parliamentarian doing stuff, and that all worked brilliantly. Now, the curveball was that the power went out in the room in the middle of the meeting, but because all of my stuff was on battery backup, we never lost the meeting.
Wow.
It was dark in the room.
Yeah.
But we never lost the meeting, and all the people in the room, like, they thought we couldn't continue, and I'm going, go on.
I wonder, did everyone turn on their phone flashlights to, like, for your light source?
It was during the day, so it wasn't that dark.
Oh.
But they just thought because the audio, the PA in the room went out and everything else went out. I said, no, we were still fine. But it took them about 2 minutes to get it all back up online, as far as all the power and all that kind of stuff. But it was one of those things where we were prepared.
Yes.
And then Mr. MacGyver comes in and says, we're going to fix this regardless of what happens. So that's where Robert's Rules of Order got a little exciting.
Well, I love that. Okay, so I have a friend too. He sets up Zoom or virtual meetings for courtrooms where, you have to legally specifically do something like isolate some people. Some people can't hear each other at times. Some people, they can have to hear each other. So he does all that. Yesterday, actually, I don't know if I shared this right. Yesterday was 90 degrees. I said it was hot here in Seattle. I blew a fuse.
Yeah.
But luckily, I have an uninterrupted power supply, right? But unluckily, I haven't recently rebalanced it because I actually had 5 of my computers running yesterday for a particular reason. All right. And so I reset the switch without losing the meeting. And then what else? Oh, then the uninterrupted power supply started squealing because it was overloaded because there was too much stuff plugged.
Right.
It's never done that before, right? And then, so I had to run my 2-hour meeting yesterday without my air conditioner.
Been there, done that. And I mean, I realize this looks like a real world headquarters, but it's actually a tough shed in my backyard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and because of that same reason, because of background noise and such things, when it's hot here, because it can get hot here in Newbury Park, halfway between Santa Barbara and LA, can get hot here, and I'll be in a meeting and I'll shut everything down, and just for that same overload reason, also noise. And I got to be careful not to be too clear or close on it because the sweat starts coming down. And I don't have any barrier for the sweat, so
Yeah,
can't hide it.
I went from 74 degrees at the end, John. I hit 91 before I left, before I could log out.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that to me, I think when I'm training virtual, whether producers or facilitators, whatever, it's like, expect something to go wrong. I don't know what. You can account for everything, but expect something unanticipated to happen. And sometimes there's no way you could have thought it through. Other times it was that little piece that you do 90% of the time that you just didn't do.
Like in hybrid too, I tell people like there's probably three major levels of hybrid. Like one is just turn on the camera. Two is like maybe one person from either virtual or in person can interact. You got very close to three, I think, which is like if you had all the resources, you could mic all 40 people, right? So they could talk at any time. More like I've seen like a board meeting where there's 10 virtual and 10 in person. You can mic 10, but miking 40 is kind of a pain.
Yeah.
Instead, I think what you did is you probably just had people come to a certain spot to make statements, right?
Depending on the room. And that's what we did because it was a big sanctuary and you couldn't do it that way. Now, some universities and corporations have spent tens of thousands of dollars to set up hybrid rooms. And usually they're about the size of a boardroom. And sometimes they just use like an owl device, which is great, except for I get a little bit of motion sickness when it's spinning all around. And also if there's any side talk in the room at all, then the owl kind of spins its head around. Other ones they basically mic the room with condenser mics.
Yeah.
And so you have the overhead mics coming down, and that creates, you can mic a boardroom like that, and you can mic a classroom like that.
Yes.
And that's what I'm doing right now with like for kick-ass hybrid rooms. I've got what I'll do is I'll set up one really good camera. I love, just as a resource, Elgato cam links, because I can take any DSLR and turn it into a webcam. So that becomes the main camera. And then even if there's not a PA system in the room, I'll bring out a Zoom 5, which has 4 inputs. One will be a lapel mic for the presenter. 2 will be condenser mics to mic the room. And 1, if needed, we'll take the audio out from the computer, and so we can mix everything. And that way you can do videos and things like that. Now you can do a good sized classroom, 30 to 50 people, and still be able to hear everybody reasonably.
I have hybrid in a box, John, which is like, I come in, I actually set up a computer with 3 or 4 screens. And now I've got 3 DSLRs, and now I can like change where the action is going on. And I have 8 remote microphones. So, but everything that John and I are saying is like, when you go to hybrid, you really need to think it through. Like I thought, well, here's one of the greatest ones was, we did an awards show, and the last thing that we forgot was an audience mic in LA where 120 people were. So when people won an award and applauded, right, we should be able to mix in a mic that's just the audience noise and mix it out. And I totally forgot, right?
Yeah. Like ambient mic, so it sounds really dry. I just did International Hot Sauce Awards hybrid, and actually it wasn't really hybrid. It was a YouTube live stream.
Yeah,
but my big mistake there was we had a guy, the performer, the guy who's doing the music, brought his own sound system. I'm going, great, we can plug into that. Well, his sound system wasn't intended to have the presenter mics going, so I had to manage feedback in a really interesting way throughout the whole live stream. And that just, it reminded me of, oh, this is why I bring my own stuff,
why I bring my own stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for sharing so many items here. 2 things I would love to hear. Like one is I would love to hear like one of your favorite activities or ways to engage the audience. All right. And I'll tell you the second question in a second. So do you have like what either it could be using some of your tech, or it could be using what's native to a platform. I'd just love to hear what's something that surprised you that really has worked universally.
So this one's just, you can use it for a lot of different reasons, but it's so simple, and it does 2 things. One, it shows people how to use Zoom or whatever platform you're on, and the other one is it gets people to leave their cameras on, and it's just what I call blink. And you say, as people are coming in, it's a great one to transition, and you just say, all right, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask you to turn off your camera, and if this question applies to you, turn the camera back on. So, okay. And I'd say, all right, this is how you, like, I'll share my Zoom screen. And if Zoom hasn't updated, it shouldn't mess things up too much. All right. So this is where your camera is, and you can turn it on and off right there. So let's do this. Go ahead and turn off your camera. And if you had more than 1 cup of coffee this morning, turn on your camera. Oh, definitely. This is about my 4th, I think. And then you keep on asking those questions. Yours is about volume. Mine's about keeping it hot. And then you just keep on asking questions, and you're doing 2 things. You're helping people connect on different things, and then you can actually turn it into setting up the topic. So you can go through, okay, how many of you have brothers and sisters? How many of you have more than one pet? How many of you? And so you go a little bit deep, more personal. And then you start talking about how many of you have ever been totally bored in a meeting, virtual or in person, on and off. And so that all of a sudden walks them into the content. Later on, you can use that skill of turning off your camera. And I got this term from one of the things I went to. They told, all right, we're going to go gopher, which means I'm going to have you turn off your camera and your microphone. And I want you to think about these things. We're going to do this for 1 minute, and I'll come back on and ask you to turn things on. And usually I set that up with, I want you to have a journal or a scratch piece of paper. And I, like, for instance, it might be towards the end where one of my favorite questions is, what has become clear to you? This is Emerson would greet people on the street with, what has become clear to you since the last time we met? You can't walk by that one. So I will say, like, we've been going for an hour and a half here. What has become clear to you in the last hour and a half? And then go for, have them write it out. And then we come back on and we have a few people share. Oh, so those are a couple of things that are kind of integrated in where you do some tech teaching, and then later on you use those skills in the program.
Well, I love that. I got to give credit to a couple people, which is Adrian Seeger showed me cameras on, cameras off as a debrief tool, which is everyone goes cameras off. And then if you want to talk, you turn your camera on. It really helps focus the group. And then I've actually permuted that recently to freeze frame, right? Because I don't know why we just started doing, like, people turn off their cameras and then turn their camera on in, like, ridiculous poses.
Yeah.
You play freeze frame, right? You have people come on and off camera like for a minute or two while the song plays. It's hilarious.
So if you've ever worked with cultures where what they're used to doing is they have it set so that when you sign into the Zoom meeting, it's automatically muted and camera off.
Yeah.
And that's the culture.
That's
so
fun.
when you do blink, what you do, the last question you ask is where everybody can say yes.
Yes.
And then you just launch right in, and people don't think to turn their camera off.
I love that. And hopefully, if you don't mind, I'm going to borrow your question. What has come clear to you since we last talked? I have a class that I'm teaching in Saudi Arabia. It means I got to stay up till 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yep. That's another thing that's changed through COVID.
Yeah, we have an opening reflection question, and so I'd love to change this question and see what answers I get. So it's a beautiful part. So thank you for that. Again, this is the whole part. So you take simple tools, but you innovate them. This is what I've always loved about the outdoor experiential education field, which as now is just doesn't really matter. I also always said that the adventure isn't necessarily like ropes course. The adventure is doing something new and unexpected or unknown to people, and that virtual is that it was unknown to most people in March of 2020, and now
well, and I think another secret is finding the adventure, or finding the lesson and the development pieces in the mundane. And that's, you don't learn, and this is attributed to it's basically you don't learn from experience. You learn from reflection on experience. And there's 2 things there. One is experience. What is that really? And you could have the most boring experience in the world, but there could be something there for you if you reflect on it, especially if it's guided by a facilitator. You can help find the lessons in almost everything. Then the challenge becomes not where's the learning, but what learning can we select? Because you get overwhelmed if you try to find meaning in everything.
Well, let's reflect one last moment here on the learnings that we've had and figure out where we think we're going to go. What do you see for the future of virtual, right? You can go as far out as you like. I know you're a reflective person, and I probably bet that you have some ideas of, like, where do you wish this stuff would go, or where do you think it'll go?
Yeah. And I think in terms of organizations and business, I think that they really have to be very intentional about reentry. And virtual, honestly, the first time you answered an email on your Palm Pilot, you were working virtual. And so that you got that, and then you have all the way back to like Atlassian, a multinational tech company. They have a rule that it's either all or none. Either everybody's in the room or everybody's virtual on for whenever they're meeting. But I think the future is for organizations and for leaders to reflect on what they learned over the pandemic and then apply it in a brand new context. Because if you don't apply what you've learned, people just want to go back to what it was. They think that what got them here is going to get them there. Thank you, Marshall Goldsmith. But they have to really step back and think in terms of what my organization, what are we going to do? And they have to return back to what I call the music, which is the term comes from Mark Twain, who once told his wife, who was trying to get him to stop swearing by swearing at him. And he says, honey, you got the words, but you just ain't got the music. And what is the music of your organization? It's the purpose and the mission. You return to that and then start asking the questions of how will we emerge from this? And then you plan based on what are the needs of your organization? What are the needs of the positions? Because there's some positions that have to be in and can't be virtual.
Right.
And so you go through that kind of first, what's our mission and purpose? Then we say, what does success look like for us as an organization? Then you step back and say, well, right now, it's not going to work to stay 100% virtual, and it's not going to work to move back to 100% in person. Let's talk about what success looks like. Now let's make a plan for reentry. And it's a continuum. You have virtual and you have in person, which is a continuum. And then you have synchronous and asynchronous, which is a continuum, which creates a convenient quadrant.
Quadrant system.
Yeah. And you start to ask yourself all these different questions, and you put the right functionality and content into the right modality. And so there's not a simple question of where you go. Virtual is with us, and it has been with us. I mean, if you look back, like I did a little research thing for that. You mentioned the book, The Learning Curve by Jim Kane. So one of the articles I wrote for it was what I call the desert or shipwrecked. And for that, I did a research on, okay, so when did this stuff start? In 1927, Bell Labs created something called the image phone in 1927. So it's been here for a while. It's not new, but it's new to a lot of people. And what I talked about in the article is that we felt shipwrecked in March of 2020. A lot of people did. Yep. And we felt like we were shipwrecked on an abandoned island. But guess what? I got shipwrecked there in 2007. So I'd been on this island for a little bit while. And the thing is, we need each other. People who've been doing virtual for a while need new thoughts and new blood. And the people who this is new, they need to understand that you're not reinventing the world. And it's such an important thing to realize. It's not new, but we can go new places. And I think there's a lot of existing virtual conference companies and virtual consultants, stuff like that, who are still doing things the way they were done in 2017. And so much was learned. This gets back to why calling something a webinar is death, because it's basically the expectation is that I can get continuing education credits by logging in and realizing I can't chat. There's no interaction.
Yeah.
So I told a couple of different platforms. I kind of became the test pilot for a lot of virtual and hybrid and asynchronous platforms. And I said, if you want to really kind of highlight what you're offering, don't call it a webinar and don't do it like a webinar. So.
Yeah, actually, I run all of my programs now in meeting format, and even when I get stuck on webinar, I ask, "Can I promote everybody?"
Right.
You'll love this, John, too. Like, you remember this thing? I mean, this is what I went back to. I've been meeting online for 35 years. This was one of the early pioneers back then. So
that's where we. I still remember doing things on AOL back in the day, which was extremely clunky.
Well, I love that your suck metaphor too. I always tell people too, like the only reason why I'm not any good is that not because I'm not good. I failed faster than I failed more and I failed faster than anybody else
Yeah.
around there. So John, thank you for so much for sharing some of your lessons and initiatives. Even so, I'm so glad too. I learned an initiative that I haven't used yet. I can't wait to use it. Where can people find you, John?
Well, I'll do this just because it's a new kind of thing to me. But right now, and we can keep this up. If you click that QR code, you'll get all my information, all my social media, all that kind of stuff. And I realize that there's a limitation, so you got to keep the code up there. But if you want to check out intowisdomgroup.com,
Yep.
that's kind of my web page slash virtual brochure. So those are a couple ways to get to me. John at praxistraining.com is the email. And I also, just so people know, I do virtual office hours and virtual coffee breaks. Mondays, I kind of open up my Zoom room, hang there while I do admin planning type stuff. And if people want to drop in and say hi, great. Fridays, if I don't have client meetings or workshops, I open up my my Zoom room for a couple hours in the morning, just so people, if they want to stop by and bounce ideas around or, solve the world's problems, create the next batch. That's what I do right there. So I'll be curious about if what this is basically Link is a card instead of, I was at a networking function and I ran out of business cards. So I said, I've got a choice. So I've got this, and I'm not sponsored by Link or anything like that, but this is NFT. If you just tap it to a phone, if they have the NFT on, it'll transfer this website will come up, or it also has a QR code. So if people don't have it on, they can just take a picture of it. So I'm curious. This is again, that whole test pilot for a platform. Let's see if it can crash and burn.
Thank you so much, John. And of course, I put in John's LinkedIn URL, so you can also join him there. John, thank you so much.
Yeah. It was a wonderful chatting with you, and maybe when I kind of put my podcasts and YouTubes on hold while I was working on other projects, love to return the favor and get you in front of my dozens of listeners. So
all 12 of them. I'll be there anytime you ask, John. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, John. All right. So let's see. We're gonna let's see. There we go. All right, so we're gonna close this out. Thank you, John Losey, for joining us, educating us, and sharing some of the cool parts. Really great to get an experiential educator here who's figured out, how to live in this virtual environment. Many old school experiential educators were saying, like, we always need face-to-face and things like that. I was actually in the early stages, one of the few that was saying, we can do this stuff. We can do digital team building, right, online. And not everyone was really sure. But now I believe many of them have figured it out. So take a look at that. Drop in John's, drop-in hours with that and check out his stuff. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
So we start people and keep